You might read the headlines saying the global economy is holding strong, but then you look at your grocery receipt, a new laptop, or your monthly electricity bill, and those numbers just keep climbing. For decades, we understood price hikes through a fairly simple lens: demand. If consumers had cash and wanted to buy more goods than the market could produce, prices naturally went up. This chart shows how that dynamic has flipped. What we are seeing right now is inflation driven by complex, structural supply-side pressures. Shipping routes are disrupted, populations are aging, and aggressive industrial policies are creating constant bottlenecks. We are watching a highly efficient, frictionless global trade network splintering into heavily shielded, isolated regional blocks. Moving away from total efficiency to a security-first setup comes with a massive hidden cost, something economists call the resilience premium. Geopolitical safety, it turns out, is highly expensive. When nations build economic fortresses to protect their supply chains, they introduce a permanent structural tax that trickles directly down to your wallet. The most immediate casualty of this fragmentation is the consumer electronics and hardware sector. Look at semiconductor manufacturing. To protect high-tech components like this silicon wafer from sudden tariff shifts and export controls, companies are aggressively tearing up old supply networks and building redundant factories in completely new regions. This bar chart compares how corporate leaders are directing their mergers and acquisitions. Notice the shift. Chief executives are no longer trying to buy market volume or speculative expansion. They are heavily prioritizing margin resilience. They are actively embedding geopolitical risk calculations into their ledgers, using corporate restructuring to buy security and create closed loops within friendly borders. Building two factories to do the job of one, simply for defensive posturing, means the baseline operational cost to produce these electronics naturally goes up. As long as tech giants are forced to maintain these redundant defensive supply chains, the price of a smartphone or a laptop is going to carry a permanent price floor. Digital infrastructure faces a similar physical constraint. Artificial intelligence promises to offset economic slowdowns by making us highly productive, but AI computation requires an immense amount of heavy physical hardware. The sheer computational power needed to train massive new models in server farms like these is draining local power grids, creating severe bottlenecks across regional energy markets. This sudden spike in demand for electricity and advanced silicon is so intense that it is complicating the climate targets and emissions goals set by national governments. The geopolitical race for AI dominance is directly competing with local utility capacity. That competition means the electricity powering your home costs more to generate. To combat these persistent supply-side pressures, central banks are forced to maintain restrictive, highly fragmented monetary policies to stabilize their local economies. But those policies are having a devastating downstream effect. The World Bank recently issued a stark warning that these aggressive interest rates are triggering sharp increases in domestic borrowing costs for emerging market economies. These governments are being squeezed by widening sovereign spreads, essentially a high-interest penalty for the perceived risk of lending to them. This is often made worse by hidden or undisclosed liabilities that aren't on the official books, leaving these nations highly vulnerable to sudden price shocks. Many of these developing nations rely heavily on commodity exports. Historically, windfall revenues from energy and materials get spent immediately rather than saved, meaning they lack the robust fiscal buffers needed to survive high borrowing costs. The resilience premium is actively draining these public budgets. As debt servicing eats up more revenue, emerging economies are left with zero fiscal room to invest in critical public infrastructure or poverty reduction. The International Monetary Fund is preparing to release an updated World Economic Outlook, projecting that global growth will decelerate down to 2.9%. This chart tracks global economic growth over the past decade. That plateau at 2.9% represents a new long-term baseline for global expansion, the permanent price of a less integrated world. Rather than trying to return to the old system, governments are actively committing to this expensive new reality. They are replacing open market commerce with massive closed ecosystem defense partnerships. Take the United Kingdom, Japan, and Italy. They recently signed a multi-billion-pound contract to build a next-generation stealth fighter jet. This kind of collaborative advanced engineering is now strictly limited to defense consortiums among nations with shared values. This risk-averse capitalization applies to basic resources too. The Asian Development Bank is now mobilizing global private capital with the sole purpose of securing fragile regional supply chains for critical minerals and clean energy platforms. Geopolitical security is no longer an abstract headline debated in Geneva. The resilience premium is a permanent structural tax, and it has successfully rewritten global trade, national budgets, and the everyday cost of modern life.